right. Here we are. Good afternoon. It's Whiskey Wednesday. I know it's also Cinco de Mayo, but whatever. It's not a real holiday. It's a bar holiday. Whiskey Wednesday, Spirits Guy, coming to you guys live from Wachusett Wine and Spirits out here in West Boylston. For the moment, I am flying solo. Corey's out somewhere beyond this wall working. We're a little short-staffed today. Not a big deal, though. We're going to persevere. And today, for Whiskey Wednesday, we're going to talk about some bourbons not named Kentucky. What does this mean? So, bourbon, as we all know, is a unique American spirit that was put into law in 1964, that bourbon can only be made in the U.S. Thing is, about 90 to 95% of all the bourbon made in the U.S. is made in Kentucky. But that does leave a small percentage that's made outside of Kentucky. Now, prior to Prohibition, whiskey was made everywhere. It was made in New York, it was made in Maryland, it was made in Pennsylvania, Indiana, Iowa, obviously Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, all over the eastern coast. All the early settlers made whiskey. Prohibition kind of wiped the landscape clean through various geographical, political movements. Most of your whiskey production ended up getting consolidated into Kentucky, and that's where all your bourbon comes from now. Over the last, I don't know, I'd say 10, 15 years, some other states have started to pop up making bourbon again. A lot of the brands that we now know of actually started as brands in other states, but we're seeing distilleries open up in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, in New York, Missouri, Iowa, and as late as Tennessee was to the game, they're now full-fledged making bourbon as well. So it's great that we're starting to see these distilleries pop up in other states. And some of these states are actually trying to kind of lobby the federal government to have their state style recognized as unique. Tennessee has done this. Obviously, Tennessee whiskey. Jack Daniel's goes through everything that bourbon goes through. Meets all the same requirements to be called bourbon. It just goes through a process known as the Lincoln County process, which means that the distillate is filtered through charcoal before aging. Even then, it could still be called bourbon, but Tennessee wants to distinguish itself. So to be Tennessee whiskey, you have to go through that process. So when you see other Tennessee whiskeys, that's what it is. New York has done it with their Empire Rye designation. So what a lot of these states are doing is they're trying to get all the grains to be grown within their state. Sourcing the oak from within the state, obviously distilling it, blending it, barreling it, aging it, bottling it all within the state to receive that state's designation. As far as I know, like I said, New York does Empire Rye, and it's a certain amount of the rye that has to come from New York. It has to be obviously made, aged, and bottled in New York. Like I said, I think Missouri's doing their own. Arkansas is doing their own. So that's a good thing. It's a healthy thing for the whiskey world and for us bourbon drinkers as well. Now, there are whiskeys from other states. Hey, Peter Thomas. There are whiskeys from places like California. There's some from Nevada, not that they're available here, but brands like Smokestack, Redwood Empire, which just won our best under $35 whiskey challenge, and they're making some of their own, but they're buying some from other distilleries, blending it together. High West, these guys make fantastic whiskey. They're out in Utah. but we're not tasting them today because they're not really a true Utah whiskey. They're a Utah brand, and they make some of their own whiskey, but they're buying distillate from somewhere else. So really, in accordance with the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, there is a little bit of transparency that is kind of ensured for the customers. So somewhere on the label, and I'm not going to mention brands, we carry them and they're good. And by the way, sourcing your whiskey, if you're getting it from MGP, if you're getting it from OZ Tyler, if you're getting it from somewhere else, that does not disqualify it or qualify it as a good whiskey or a bad whiskey. Really, the art of whiskey is the art of blending. So there are people, barrel craft spirits, who might buy whiskey from Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky and from somewhere else, and when they blend it all together, it's a fantastic product. But yeah, there are certain brands out there that might say that they're from a certain state, and they're actually buying the whiskey from somewhere else. A lot of times they'll either buy distillate, maybe MGP made it, and we're going to buy it and bring it back to our own state, age it and bottle it there. A lot of new upstart distilleries might go to MGP and say, what do you got for 6-year-old bourbon with a high rye mash bill? They might buy those barrels, bring them back to their facility, blend them and bottle it. They're not even aging it in the state that it's from. But if there is a state on there, somewhere on the bottle, they are supposed to tell you where it came from. So what you want to look out for as a consumer is words like produced by, bottled by, blended by. And you'll see it on a lot of them. In fact, when we talked about George Dickel a few weeks ago, their rye distilled in. That's what you're looking for. Distilled in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Now, they don't have to say by law where it comes from. But we all know Lawrenceburg, Indiana is MGP. But it might say distilled in Kentucky, but be listed as a Colorado whiskey. Or, I don't know, a Portland, Oregon whiskey. And there are some of those whiskeys from Oregon that are not necessarily made in Oregon. You're looking for distilled in. So like I said, when we did George Dickel rye, distilled in Indiana. Chances are it's MGP, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. So again, it doesn't discredit it from being sourced. It just is nice to know where it comes from. So what I put together for you guys here is some whiskeys that are actually distilled, aged, and bottled in quote-unquote other states. So they're not MGP juice, they're not distilled in Kentucky, and they're not distilled in Tennessee, which are kind of the big three for bourbon production. And again, at least 90% of all the bourbon made is made in Kentucky, which is fascinating considering how much bourbon comes out of MGP. And it is kind of important to point out that there's a difference between a brand and a distillery. A brand, like say a Jefferson's, doesn't mean that there's a Jefferson's distillery. What Jefferson's does is they go and they buy whiskey from somewhere else. Could be Heaven Hill, could be OZ Tyler, could be Willett, could be a couple of other distilleries. They blend it. That being said, Buffalo Trace Distillery is where brands like Eagle Rare, Buffalo Trace, Blanton's, Weller, Pappy, all those brands are made at one distillery. But that distillery might make 100 brands that are owned by other people. So brands and distilleries are separate, that sometimes end up being in the same place. As with every sort of Whiskey Wednesday we do from here on out, there is going to be an accompanying blog post that will show up on our website. So if you go to the website, click on blogs, you'll be able to get sort of all the info that I'm sharing with you guys today. Maybe some tasting notes, and then links to our website where you can actually purchase this product online for curbside pickup. So I actually have 4 brands here, a couple of different bottlings from 2 of them. And I'm going to start with the Bowman Brothers Pioneer Spirit Virginia Straight Bourbon Whiskey. I start with this one, and I also kind of put this disclaimer out. I know that there is a distillery in Virginia. Bowman Brothers, they fought in the militia during the Revolutionary War. They had a distillery there. Distillery died out. The name was revived in the 80s. I believe in the 90s, Buffalo Trace or Sazerac actually bought the brand. So this is owned by Sazerac, which is who owns Buffalo Trace and so many other great brands. I know that there's a distillery there. I can't find any info on the mash bill, which is pretty typical of a Sazerac product. And I can't find any distinctive report that this whiskey is actually made in Virginia. That being said, there is a distillery. This is legit listed as a Virginia straight bourbon. Again, a little murky on some history of it and where it comes from and where the juice comes from. There is sort of an online chatter, rumor, that since this is owned by Sazerac, this is actually Buffalo Trace Mash Bill number 1. But no confirmation on that. We don't talk about price, but I will say that this is very, very affordable. I have plenty of it in stock. It was an allocated item, for a while, but it is pretty readily available now. It's got a great nose that lets you know you're drinking whiskey. Toasty oak, 90 proof, just kind of a good sweet spot for me. It's a small batch whiskey. Again, no regulated sort of rules on that. And I will say it does smell a bit like Four Roses, although I know it's not Four Roses distillate, or I'm pretty sure it's not. So good. Sort of tropical fruit notes, creamy, a little toasty around the edges, a little bit of caramel, some vanilla, definitely some like pineapple-y kind of notes. This is fantastic. If you haven't tried it, if you're weirded out by it, I can't recommend this enough. On the Corey and I rating scale, is it good? Absolutely. Is it worth the money? Absolutely. Does this bottle start a conversation on your home bar? My goodness, yes. I kind of feel like if I walked into a bar, an old saloon, militia times in Virginia, that's the kind of style of bottle I would expect to see on the bar. Now, just to kind of point out, in addition to the Bowman Brothers, we also have the Isaac Bowman whiskey, which I'm assuming is the same as this, but this is finished in port barrels, 92 proof. Interestingly enough, and I'm not knocking, just sort of stating facts, on this one here, it is listed as Virginia Straight Whiskey. Now I get that this is finished, so it technically isn't bourbon. It's bourbon finished in, but there's no mention of Virginia on the front of this bottle at all. It does say produced by Bowman Distillery. So that being said, it may be Virginia distillate, it may not, but it's definitely other and worth trying. Now we get into some other whiskeys. The first one I'll go through with you guys. I have a limited amount of this. This was incredibly allocated to me. This is Rocktown. Rocktown is the first distillery, legal distillery open. I guess that's an important point to make. The first legal distillery opened in Arkansas post-Prohibition. These guys have been around since 2010. This is a 92 proof bourbon. Don't have the mash bills with me right now, but I want to say it's 82, 9, and 9. 82% corn, 9 rye, 9 barley. That is definitely the mash bill for one of these. Everything is grown in Arkansas. It's made in Arkansas. It's aged in Arkansas, and it's bottled in Arkansas. One kind of cool thing that I would be remiss if I didn't put out. Yeah, the port finish is definitely killer, Peter. And we definitely get some back in stock today, so we're good for a bit. All these sort of craft distilleries that are popping up, we deal with Balcones, Driftless Glenn, and some of the other ones that we're seeing. They're relatively young whiskeys. This one is 19 months. This one is minimum of 2 years. This one is a minimum of 2 years. It's amazing to me. Sometimes when I taste young whiskeys or quote-unquote local whiskeys, the wood hasn't integrated into the distillate. So to me, I get that sort of grassy, grainy, raw wood, like 2x4 in your mouth kind of flavor. I don't get that with any of these. So it is kind of amazing that for a young whiskey, we're not getting those woody notes. They're a little bit softer, which also encourages me that as these guys get more stock laid down, as they start to get into 4-year, 6-year, 8-year, 10-year barrels in their rick houses, what the future holds for us as whiskey drinkers is the potential for some very cool, unique, fantastic offerings that will offer some slightly different flavor profiles, but are going to be interesting and unique. This one, I like this a lot, and it's quirky, and I like it because it's quirky. There's a smokiness to it. This is my own personal bottle. It's been open for a while. And I'm now getting some cherry notes on it, much the same way I do from like an Old Forester. There's so much going on in this. There's some cherryness, cherry sort of flavors in the middle. There's definitely some toasty, woody notes. And there's almost like a smoky, it's going to sound weird when I say it, but there's almost like a bacon kind of thing that's going through there, like with a little bit of smokiness. I almost feel like I pick up some salinity there. Sort of an oily kind of fattiness to it. If you guys can see the color on that, that's 19 months in oak. So I don't know what they're doing with their barrels down there, how they're aging them, how thick the barrels are that they're using, but they're getting great color out of their whiskey. They're so good. Now these guys here, they've been around for a bit longer, but not much. This is Balcones. They are out of Texas, and they list theirs as true Texas bourbon, straight bourbon, so it's aged at least 2 years. It says so right on the back. Distilled and bottled by Balcones. Aged at least 24 months. At least. So it might even be a little bit older. This is sort of the newest everyday item to their lineup. This we've had, got them backwards. This we've had for a while, the Baby Blue, which is a great pot distilled corn whiskey. So this is at least 80% corn. And not for nothing, that's 6 months in oak for that color. This is their bourbon, 2 months in oak, pot distilled. So what I get with pot distilled whiskeys in general is I tend to get a little bit more body, a little bit more oiliness, a little bit more viscosity. This is clocking in at 92 proof, and it is a bourbon, which means it's at least 51% corn, but it's also a 4-grain. So it's corn, wheat, barley, and rye. All 4 major grains into one pot. I can't get an exact mash bill, but it is a 4-grain. And it is pot distilled. And again, out of those 4, at least 51% of it is corn. And I know all the corn comes from Texas. Hence, the name Baby Blue, because they use Texas blue corn. This, to me, and anybody who knows me knows I typically buy a bottle of whiskey. When I finish it, I don't really go back and buy another one because I'm always moving on to the next thing. Very rarely do I repeat a buy, not because I don't like it, just because I'm always looking for the next whiskey to try. And anybody who's been to my home knows that I probably have too much whiskey at home anyways. This I have rebought. Great sort of nutty nose, almost like peanut oil. So it's rich, it's oily, dark flavor on there. That roasted corn really comes through. How do I... If you can imagine Cracker Jacks, that caramel, that corn, that nuttiness. And if you can imagine that with like, I don't know, my girlfriend and I, we have Special K for breakfast in the morning. And every now and then we'll buy the Special K that has a little chocolate slivers in it. So that combination of flavors of like those bran flakes and that sort of dark chocolate, that's what I'm getting here. Like that sort of bran flake, dark chocolate, nutty, caramel, corn, sweet, viscous. There's a lot going on here. Yeah, this is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. In fact, if you come in and you're a first-time customer and you're looking to buy some whiskey, there are certain standard offerings that we go to. Rebel 100, obviously, Balcones, and Redwood Empire, Lost Monarch. Brands that we just absolutely believe in. I know that there aren't a lot of stores that carry those 3 items. I'm not getting anything special from my sales reps, my distributors, the distilleries, anything. They're just 3 of our favorite collectively staff picks. And these are the ones that we kind of point out. If you want to try some different styles that aren't the usual either oak bomb or caramel vanilla bomb. Some sort of different flavors. And the last one that I'm going to show you guys. And actually, Peter, I had you taste this yesterday. I know we got your seal of approval on this one. This is the Driftless Glenn. Again, to kind of backtrack to the Rocktown, if I was in a saloon in Arkansas and I was looking over the bar at the back, that's the design of the bottle I would expect. I love that bottle. Is it good? Yes. Is it worth the money? Absolutely. There's the bottle starter conversation, without a doubt. Balcones, is it good? Absolutely. Is it worth the money? Without a doubt. Am I in love with the bottle? I don't know. I think that bright red label, when people come to my house, they certainly ask what it is. So it does start a little bit of a conversation. I don't know what they lose in angel share in Texas. And it is a great question, and I don't know a lot about their rick houses. So I won't state with fact, but I will say that when we were down in Kentucky, some of the newer rick houses that are being built, and this is sort of a contentious thing of, it's the same sort of argument between brands that chill filter and don't chill filter. The ones who chill filter their whiskey say it doesn't change the flavor at all. The ones who don't chill filter their whiskey say it would change the flavor if they did chill filter. So in the same style of argument, the newer rick houses that are being built, they're being built as temperature controlled warehouses. I want to say that Michter's is aged in a temperature controlled warehouse. I know when we were at Old Forester, they have major rick houses out near Shively, but their Whiskey Row, where they're aging them, when you go to visit Old Forester, there's a rick house on site. But it's a temperature controlled room, so they can raise or lower and circulate the air for a more consistent thing. So I don't know, with Balcones being a newer sort of thing, are they just making rick houses that are getting natural heat, or are they temperature controlling? But with the extreme heat down there, I would say that they would probably lose a lot more to angel share. And it's sort of a great point that I guess I'd have to look into a little bit more. I don't know how high their rick houses are either, which would obviously affect temperature as far as height. You know, in Kentucky, the barrels on the top tend to get the hottest because the heat rises. Closer to the sun, you're getting heated from the top. So certain places have lower rick houses. But yeah, I would have to assume if everything is sort of natural, they're losing a lot there. Probably the same thing in Arkansas too. Hot summers, climate very similar to Kentucky. And this one in Wisconsin, I know that it gets super hot in the summertime and super cold in the wintertime. So you're getting some major temperature fluctuations. And I guess to sort of go on a sidebar tangent, if anybody's wondering what those temperature fluctuations really mean to bourbon, to whiskey, to aging in general, not only does the temperature get really hot and really cold, but the liquid inside the barrel will expand and contract, as well as water and alcohol evaporating at different temperatures. So, alcohol will evaporate through the wood because the wood is porous. Even though it seals the liquid in, it is porous, and the sort of vapors can get through the wood. Alcohol and water evaporate at different temperatures, so depending on where you are in the rick house, sometimes you lose more water, sometimes you lose less water. If you're losing more water, the alcohol content can go up. If you're losing less, the alcohol content can actually lower. The other thing that happens in that contraction and expansion is the distillate, the whiskey, is actually going into the wood. So the inside of that wood being charcoal, the liquid is going through the charcoal, and then when it contracts, it's coming back out through the charcoal. So if you think of a Brita filter, taking out the impurities at home, you fill your sort of jug with water, it goes through that charcoal filter, it's taking out the impurities. That's what the inside of the barrel is doing to the whiskey. Goes in, comes out. It's getting filtered. Not only that, but it's picking up color from that char and the color of the wood as well. So kind of great point there. about extreme conditions in more angel share. I honestly don't know, so I don't want to give a completely definitive answer. Although that was a long-winded answer to not answer. Driftless Glenn. This is the newest member in this sort of other whiskey family. These guys are from Wisconsin. They have been around since, I believe, 2015. So this is their 6th year of operation. It's amazing that they're getting product out to the marketplace already. Driftless Glen is a region in Wisconsin where these guys are located. All the corn, all the grain comes within 150 miles of the distillery, so it's pretty local. And this is aged, again, right there. Distilled, aged a minimum of 2 years, bottled by in Wisconsin. So it's made there, it's aged there, it's bottled there. Husband and wife team. He was an automotive guy, so he owned car dealerships in Wisconsin. The wife, and I forget her name right now, but she's a sculptor and an artist. So anybody who knows me knows that I love bottles with a purpose. Square bottle, again, saloon bottle. I wouldn't be surprised to see this on a back bar in an old outpost town in Wisconsin. So their thing is they touch every bottle that they put out. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this. I'll bring this up in close. There's a thumbprint right there. There's a thumbprint right there to sort of signify them holding the bottle. So again, as being a sculptor designer, beautiful design. There I am. And also, I don't know if this was intentional, and I actually read this in an article when I was doing some research. It makes for sort of a great no-slip grip spot, where if your fingers are a little wet, if you're a bartender and you pick this up, it might slip through. But if you catch those grooves, that bottle's not going anywhere. Sealed with a cork, hits all the marks. And again, as Corey and I like to say, sometimes the whiskey is really good, it's sweet, goes down easy, but sometimes you want to know that you're drinking whiskey. And this definitely has that nose that you're drinking whiskey. A little oaky, 96 proof, so it's not bashful. A lot of sort of good wood, toastiness, vanilla bean, like fig, like darker fruit. Perfect. Toasty, smoky, oaky. Some great corn sweetness. That smoke and that little bit of like wood burn there, which is just really nicely integrated, well balanced. Balances out that sweetness really, really nicely. Not too heavy, not overly viscous, but certainly not light. It's deceivingly light and easy for a 96 proof whiskey, which is not to say that it's a light, but this is kind of a dangerous one, just because it goes down so easily. As a whiskey drinker, I hate the term smooth, but yeah, there's no burn to that whatsoever. It is smooth. Again, not a lot of it out there. I don't know if you can see it, but Whiskey Advocate gave it 90 points. That's pretty legit. And again, it's only 2-year-old whiskey, but my goodness, the color, I wouldn't have believed it was only 2 years old. Yeah, fantastic. So there it is. 4 other whiskeys, other bourbons from other parts of the country. So if you're out there and you're looking for something different, something interesting, you want to support the American spirit of bourbon, but you want to show some love, spread it around, these are definitely some great bottles to try, without a doubt. Alright, I'm going to wrap it from there. Yeah. Again, if you guys like what we're doing, share these videos, comment. If there's something you want to see me or Corey or the two of us do together, spirit-wise, if you want us to talk about tequilas or brands of gin, brands of rum, yeah, drop us a comment. Email me, Rich@Wachusett as we get into sort of wedding season, graduation season. If you want to put together orders for big parties, again, email me, Rich@Wachusett or you just send a message to our Facebook page. Either way, like us, follow us on the page. By the way, Yellowstone Barrel Pick should be here in 2 weeks. So if you want to pre-order any of those bottles, there will be a special deal. We're not going to talk about it here, obviously, Facebook spies. But feel free to email me about what that special deal is going to be to pre-order bottles of our Yellowstone Barrel Pick. I have a feeling, folks, this one is not going to be here for very long. And once you try it, you're going to want to stockpile it because it's going to be limited. It's going to be amazing. That is it. We're going to wrap it. We'll talk to you guys soon. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Cheers.